Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited today to welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast as our guest, James I. Bond from Los Angeles, California. No, not that James Bond. Uh, Jim Bond is one of America's leading behavioral management and business marketing specialists. He's the author of the breakthrough and multi-award winning book Brain Glue, which I'm really enjoying reading at the moment, nearly finished. Brain Glue, how selling becomes much easier by making your ideas sticky. And the book is a finalist as the best business book of the year by Publishers Weekly. So congratulations on that, and welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast. Jim, it's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you, Jürgen. It's very nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Now, the idea of brain glue, it's a fascinating concept, and it's all about getting your messaging right, which I guess is very much consistent with the work that we do in marketing and podcasting, getting our message out there. So it's very relevant to all of those areas. But I think it's relevant to everyone in terms of how you can sell an idea. Like, we have a wonderful idea, and then the usual reaction is, oh, that's a rubbish idea. And if we're passionate about the idea and we really believe in it, how can we kind of bring people on board for that idea and get help with implementing those ideas? And I think there's a lot in the book that can help with that. So I'm really looking forward to digging into all of those things with you today, Jim. Before we do that, what's the impact you're making in the world today?
Well, it's fascinating that I'm lucky enough that, this book has taken 35 years to develop, basically. I'm originally from Montreal, although I ran an advertising agency in Montreal first. And it was really powerful for me. I moved to Los Angeles about 35 years ago. We actually named our middle daughter, we gave her the initials LA so that we'd remember how long have you been in Los Angeles? How old's Lauren? Oh, she's 35. Okay, great. We've been here 35 years. So it helps me with that. And when I was in Southern California, I built one of America's leading behavioral management firms. Uh, we had PhDs in psychology and organizational development on the one side, and then senior consultants from McKinsey, Ernst& Young, Bain Capital, things like that on the other side. And we focused all along on implementation. When I was young, I'm a Pisces, and my mom says, "You're a Pisces, you're a dreamer." And I was like, so my whole life I've been fighting that and focusing on implementation. We can
Yeah,
get dreams, but how do we implement? And
yeah.
so yeah, so to me, I do a lot of work with volunteer work with the U.S. Small Business Administration. Sometimes we'll have like 20 or 30 people, and sometimes 3, 4, 500 people. And for me, it's you know, I seem to have a different approach than a conventional approach as far as marketing is concerned, particularly because I focus on again behavioral management. So for me, there are two great benefits I have. One is that people approach me all the time and give me, thanks because they've actually been able to implement it and had massive changes. So that's really fun in their lives. But I wrote a book before this called The Secret Life of Fathers. I'm not promoting it or anything like that. I mean, we're sort of working on fixing it, but yeah, the Father Daughter Project. But it's just there's a great reward. You must get it also. There's a great reward in people coming up to you and saying, "Wow, I implemented this thing and it was really
Mm.
great," and "Oh, it's changed my life," and whatever else. And so, besides clients, and we get clients too, so that's good, and they pay us, which is good.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
no, I think it's just one of my favorite movies of all time was Pay It Forward. And
Mm.
it's just the whole concept of if I learn something or somebody teaches me something and it's valuable and I can't pay it forward, then it's almost like, why am I doing it? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a fabulous movie. I really enjoyed that. And yes, it's got a very powerful message. You're right. Very simple little school project that started off as just a little exercise for a bunch of kids, and it turned out to have a profound impact on a whole range of people's lives,
Right.
transform their lives. So,
Yep.
good recommendation. Go check that out. That's your first action from today's episode. James, the science of persuasion is what really underpins brain glue, I think, and some of that probably comes from your work as behavioral specialist. How did you get into this area, and what are some of the lessons, some of the kind of simple lessons that people might be able to pay attention to and relate to everyday life?
Well, I started with an advertising agency. I worked my way, worked hard at it. I have a technical background, and we started winning major clients. We won clients like Kraft Foods, Timex watches, Avon Cosmetics, Abbott Laboratories, Seagram's. The world's headquarters for Seagram's is in Montreal, and so I was doing really well, focusing on logic. I'm a logical person. I have a technical background. And so we had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America because of the connections I had, because of the work I was doing, et cetera. And we lost it. And they thought we were going to win it because they loved our logical reasons of why somebody shouldn't do drugs. And when I lost it to, I deserved to lose it to. It was
Hmm.
fantastic. It was a person in a commercial, person holding an egg saying, "This is your brain," and then cracking the egg shell and dropping the egg into a sizzling frying pan. And as you watch the egg frying in the frying pan, in the sizzling frying pan, they said, "This is your brain on drugs." Any
Hmm.
questions? And
Yeah,
it was profound, but it was emotional selling, and I wasn't used to emotional selling. I had no idea how to do emotional selling. I was taught in school logic. You do well in math. You do, 1 + 1 = 2. You know what I mean? 12
yeah.
plus whatever it is. And so um, it scared me. I said, have I made a mistake in my career? You know, because I can give you logic, but it turns out that emotion is the driving factor of why people make decisions. I mean,
Hmm.
I might feed you something logical. You and I are logical people, and you'll trust me. Maybe you have experience with me, and so, but that's emotion also. But there's two famous scientists, Gerald Zaltman, who was a Harvard University professor, and there was Daniel Kahneman, who is the Nobel Prize winning psychologist,
Hmm.
and both of them demonstrated clearly that more than 90% of all decisions are made on the emotional side of the brain.
Hmm.
We call it right brain. It's not really right because there's some in the left, some on the right, but we call it right brain versus left brain. I always ask people, say, well, how do you know which is the logic side? Logic left. It's an easy way to remember it. Logic left. They both. But what they're demonstrating is, most decision making is done by triggering the right side of the brain, the emotion side of the brain. And so what I did was I recognized that they didn't teach emotional selling in school. And as I went to the library and looked for things, there were some superficial, ideas, but nothing that really connected with me and helped me understand how do I create emotional selling. So what I did was I wrote your brain on drugs on a 3x5 card, and I put it into a box. I put a box aside, which I've actually had for 35 years, and I call it a passion box. And every time I would
Love
experience
it.
emotional selling somehow,
Yeah.
it could be a phrase that somebody said. I'm old enough to remember in America, President John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country could do for you, ask what you can
Hmm.
do for your country." As time went on, I learned that's called chiasmus, which is a flip. Okay,
Hmm.
um, but when I would hear
So
something
you
like
wrote
that,
those down into cards and collected them over the years.
and paper, and ads, or articles sometimes. So
Hmm.
my wife hated sitting next to me in a doctor's office because I would go into a doctor's office with her and I'd be looking through a magazine and go, "Oh, look at this. This is fantastic." And she'd go, "Do not tear it out of the magazine." I said, "No, I have to put it in my passion box." And she would go, "No." And she would like move away. So she'd sit far away from me. So she pretends she doesn't know me. And as I tear the magazine, but I put it in my passion box. But so one day later on, many years later, when I was in California, moved to California, John Gray was telling me how he wrote his book, Men, Women, and Relationships. And it's a fabulous, one of the best relationship books ever. Okay.
Hmm.
But he sold about 20,000 copies of the book. If you're spending that much time to write a book and
Hmm.
everything, 20,000 copies really isn't very much. And he was frustrated. So he was doing seminars uh, to try to promote the book. And he said something in one of the seminars, and all the women in the audience laughed hysterically. And the men kind of looked at the women and went like, "What was so funny about what he just said?" And
Hmm.
so he said, you see, there's some things that women find really funny. There's some things that men find really funny. And then there's some things that everybody finds funny. And so one of the women screamed out from the audience, it's almost like men are from a different planet. And he said, I guess men are from Mars. And
Yeah.
everybody laughed hysterically. When he got home, he was thinking, well, if men are from Mars, where are women from? Well, women are from Venus because Venus is the god of love. And then he
Mm.
thought, got this crazy idea. What happens if I change the title of my book to
Yeah.
Men are from Mars, Women are from Venus? And change some of the content in it. Leave the content basically the same, but make references to Men are from Mars, Women are from
Mm.
Venus throughout the book. Guess what happened? He
Yeah.
went from 20,000 copies overnight to 500,000 copies, then 1,000,000, then 2,000,000, then 10,000,000. He's so far sold over 50 million copies of his book. At $10 a book, that's 500 million. That's $500 million. That's not bad for sitting at a typewriter for him because it was back then the typewriter. But the point is, because he changed the title of the book, suddenly sales exploded.
Mm.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. When I came home, I was going to put the book Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus in my box, and I thought, no, this is too powerful, and it relates to, application. This wasn't just a theoretical thing. This was he literally changed the title, and suddenly the book sales exploded. And so I took my passion box and I dumped it on my bed, and I started seeing, are there groups? Can I group them together? And so I started
Mm.
to realize his was a metaphor or analogy. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was, because obviously men are not from Mars. Well, we might be actually from a different planet, but that's a whole other story. Um, but what I realized was, okay, that's interesting. So we have the television show Shark Tank. It's not a tank full of sharks, it's investors. If they called it the Investors Club, would it be as successful as Shark Tank? No, I don't think so. And so in America, and I think you're in Australia, so do they have it in Australia too, Shark Tank?
Yeah. 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 We've got that.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, it's a
Mm.
powerful name because it triggers emotion side of the brain as I started learning how that works. Then I was reading about Rocky Road ice cream, which in America built Dryer's ice cream. They were struggling, and then when they came up with Rocky Road ice cream, sales exploded and turned them into a blockbuster of success. Well, Rocky Road ice cream, when you open it up, it doesn't have rocks in it. It
Mm.
has nuts. It's chocolate ice cream with nuts and marshmallows, but it's bumpy like a rocky road. So they called it Rocky Road ice cream, which is an analogy or metaphor. So that's one thing. It also, Rocky Road uses alliteration, the repetition of sounds, Rocky Road.
Mm.
And I suddenly started realizing, look at how many famous and massively successful brands use alliteration. Coca-Cola,
Mm.
Best
Yeah.
Buy, Bed Bath and Beyond in
As
America.
well.
We have TikTok, PayPal.
Yeah.
I mean, think of you think it's a coincidence that
It's
TikTok?
it is yeah it is fascinating, isn't it? All these tools, and there's a whole lot more that we'll come to that you categorize and outline in your book Brain Glue. What I'm curious about, do you think any of these folks gave a lot of thought to when they were putting their name in? I mean, the story about John Gray is really interesting because that he was listening, in some ways he was listening to his audience, and he kind of reacted to something that resonated with the audience, and that clearly resonated with a bigger audience when he renamed his book. But do you think some of those other people were doing the kind of behavioral analysis or background scientific understanding that an analysis that you're doing right now that can help us say, well, how can we use some of these tools?
No, they don't. I'm going to give you two examples. First, John Gray. Men are from men, women, and relationships as left brain. It's not emotional.
Hmm.
It's just a
Hmm.
logical description of what the book is about.
Yeah.
But he experienced emotion in the audience. They were laughing, you know?
Hmm.
And so he went like, wow, this is just by saying the words men are from Mars, women are from Venus, people started laughing. That's
Hmm.
interesting. Now, and he wanted to apply emotion to it, okay? But he wasn't. So that's the first thing. I'm lucky enough that I interacted with Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. Now, Chicken Soup for the Soul is another blockbuster, okay? And he was telling me that he wanted to come up with a title, and he was trying to think of something that would be good. And it's like, it's basically they have 101 stories that are motivating. Okay,
Hmm.
and So he was thinking, I need to come up with a title that's really good, but different, you know? And he got to brainstorm, I should call it chicken soup because chicken soup makes people feel better if they're sick. Okay,
Mm.
so what if I call it chicken soup? So he told me he originally wanted to call it chicken soup for the spirit. But then he thought about it and he went, it doesn't really sound right. He didn't understand the concept of alliteration.
Mm.
Alliteration. He knew it, but he didn't think of it that way. But
Yeah. Yeah.
SOUP and SOUL go together. So he said, I just emotionally came up with this crazy idea, chicken soup for the soul. Now he's written many other books, okay? But he was telling me first he started reading my book and he was mad at me. And I said, "Why are you mad?" I'm sorry, Mister, Jack Canfield. And he said, "No, no, I'm mad because I was just breezing through it because I have lots of books I have to read and I couldn't put your book down." And I was like, "That's a nice thing to say. Thank you." I said, "Can I tell everybody that?" He said, "Oh yeah, you can do that." But he said, "It isn't just that. It's I realize." I mean, Jack Canfield, he sold 500 million books, okay? I don't have to tell him what to do, how to market. He
Mm.
knows more than me. But he said, I I never realized that I was creating a metaphor. I was just trying to get passionate about like what do I don't just want to do a logical kind of cover title. I just want to come up with something that's passionate. And he was like sleeping when he woke up one morning. He said, "Chicken soup. I should call it chicken
Mm.
soup." And he just came up with the chicken soup for the spirit, I guess. But he said that as I started reading your book, I started realizing the patterns. Because Chicken Soup for the
Mm.
Soul is the only book I used right brain selling with. I used brain glue
Yeah.
and it's because I had that one. Now the other books are all just very technical, and he describes it technically. They're not bad. They're massively successful. Many of his books, but they're successful in a large part because he's famous and became
Yeah.
successful. And so I think what happens is a lot of people we get inspired. I mean, we're passionate people. I remember I saw this person had a T-shirt that said "Life sucks and then you die," and I'm going like, "No, that's terrible. This is life right now." That I can think of people I can hand that shirt to that I can use
Yeah.
it. By
Yeah.
the way,
Yeah.
but I mean, we have to be inspired by passion, and so a lot of people want to be inspired by passion. And so I'll give you a story. There's Paul Tran created an electric razor, okay, that's meant to shave man's private parts. And so he was struggling because he didn't want to offend people, but he still wanted to make it obvious and clear what it was that his product did. So he was thinking about it. As we go to analogies or metaphors, it's just like, and I say, pick the wildest, craziest idea you can think of that it's just like. And so he didn't work for me. I mean, he didn't go through my class, but he came up with this idea. And the idea was, well, it's just like, a lawnmower. Why don't I call it the lawnmower? It's a crazy name. It's turned him into a massively successful business, calling his shaver the lawnmower, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just, and people share, hey, guess what this product is called? The lawnmower. Do you believe it? And you share it with people. And he's massively wealthy and he became massively successful because of calling his product the lawnmower. And so, you know, I think what happens is nobody told him, this. But what's
Mm.
happening is people, as they're going through this now, they're starting to recognize these things all over the place. Oh, wow. You know, I never thought of alliteration as being business names. And I have to, I work as a consultant. And so I would help clients often build a business name for their product or service. But I never thought of these tools. Now I go and I open it up and go, oh, let's try rhyme. So I have this a construction company that I work with. Once I started understanding how brain glue works, and I had no experience with construction companies. I have now because I've worked so many years because of the success we had with them. So after there are three partners, so after 10 years, they had $2 million of sales, which isn't bad. $2 million of sales. I sat down with them and I changed things, and they went from 2 million to 10 million in 1 year. Okay, it took them 10
Mm.
years to get to two. In 1 year, they went to 10. And 2 years later, it went to 32 million of sales. So they went from 2 to 32 million of sales in less than 3 years because of the change I made. And so the change went this way. I took a whiteboard and I said, let's make a shopping list of all the different types of clients you have. Okay. Whether you like them or don't like them, forget about it. Let's just make a list of all of them. And we went through and created a shopping list of all the different types of clients they've worked with. Okay. And then I said, okay, let's play a game. We're going to have you choose just one that you're going to pretend you're going to focus your whole business on just one type of client and nobody else. Okay, we're going to specialize you on one. Who would it be? And it took them a while, and they finally said, well, fire restoration for insurance companies, meaning
Mm.
every time an insurance company has to deal with a client that's has their house burns down or their part of their house has a fire, we'll deal with them. Okay. And we have some little tricks we learned and all that stuff because we've done 3 of them already for 2 different companies, and we've had really good success. And if we had to, it would actually be fun to specialize just in fire restoration for insurance companies. So I said, okay, that's good. Now, what are we going to call your company? Or what are we going to call the service you offer? Well, why don't we call it fire extinguisher? We're the fire extinguisher for insurance companies, okay? We'll even call it Fire X so you can look us up easily on the internet, okay? But we'll be the fire extinguisher. And so they would go to clients and they would say, just think of us as your fire extinguisher. You have a fire,
Mm.
we're the fire extinguisher. We're the guys that go in and extinguish what was damaged, okay? And just that hook, well, the specializing, but also the hook
Mm.
exploded their business. And they went from in 1 year from 2 million to 10 million in sales. In fact, they used to razz me because they said, hey, I thought we were supposed to have 12 million. I said, shut up. They bought each other like the most expensive BMWs. They each one of
Yeah.
them bought each other, and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, well,
amazing.
there's a couple of things there, isn't there? There's the getting really clear on um, a specialist niche where you can actually be the best at, which kind of I'm
Yes.
sure there's a lot of other work that they did in the background, but then getting the messaging right. And in some ways, to me, getting the messaging right and then applying the emotional selling techniques that you're describing um, is much easier with being really clear about your target audience and who the niche is.
Yes. So I have this woman, this mom, who's said to me, "Okay, so can you help me with brain glue with my kids?" I'm like, "Okay, I could try." She says, "I've got the first 2 twins, and then I've got a 14-year-old, and so let's start with the twins, okay?" I read them a story, and they want me to read another story, and then another story, and we never get them to go to bed, and they drive me crazy. And said, so we came up with this poem. We said, when the story's read, it's time for bed. Okay. When the story's read, it's time for bed. And so sit with them and practice and say, okay, guys, I'll read you a story, but when the story's read, we go to bed. So when the story's read, what? They said, okay, mommy, we go to bed. So she said, I read him a story. He said, mommy, second story. Read that one. He said, no, when the story's read, okay, mommy, we go to bed. And
Yeah.
she came back and she said, it worked. Wow, it was
Yeah.
great. So now you got to help me with my older son. It's like, oh no, it's like I'm so, I'm not that perfect, but okay. She says, my son asked a question. He said, um, why, when we're older, why do we have to follow so many rules in life? That's a tough question. So I said, okay, let's figure this out. First, rhyme works. Rhyme is a brain glue tool. So let's say, what rhymes with rules? Fools. So only fools don't follow rules. There's one. Okay, so I could use that, but I want to make it even stronger by adding an analogy to it or a metaphor. So I came up with one and it worked. I sat down with her and her son. We had practiced this, and I sat down with her and her son and I said, okay, so you were asking your mom, um, why do you have to follow so many rules in life? So if you're thirsty, you could drink out of a toilet, but why would you want to? Remember, only fools don't follow rules. And he goes, huh, that makes sense. First of all, getting a 14-year-old to say anything
Yeah.
makes sense it's a miracle. I'm ready to leave because I hope he doesn't ask another question. But does it really make sense? Or did I just hit him with brain triggers,
Mm.
emotional triggers? And so I've heard these things, these two sayings, expressions in politics that are fascinating, that use the same concept, okay? One of them says, you can't hug a child with nuclear arms.
Mm.
I mean, it doesn't really make sense, but you're hugging a child and nuclear arms and putting the two together, and suddenly people get emotional about that.
Mm.
Okay. The other one is anti-drug one, anti-gun one. It's the right to bear arms is almost as crazy as the right to arm bears.
Mm.
I mean, it's actually crazy, but it connects with people, and they go like, "Oh yeah," and I'm fascinated by this because what it does is if you can trigger the right part of the brain, the emotion side of the brain, when you're talking to somebody, you engage them more. And like I love this thing. Kurt Cobain, the musician, had a song called "Smells Like Teen Spirit." What does Teen Spirit smell like? I mean, is that in a locker room? It's like what do we? But I mean, it's because he used what I call um, emotional heightening. Okay, heightening, sensual heightening. That's what it is. Taking senses and heightening them. He basically added something you didn't expect, which is
Yeah.
smells like Teen Spirit, and because of that, it sticks to the brain. I mean, so there's a term called redintegration. You're reading the book, so you probably heard a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Redintegration is the brain's need for completion. It's why we watch crappy movies to the end. My wife. I walked into the living room, and my wife is watching this TV show. I said, "Is this any good?" She said, "No, it's terrible." I said, "Well, why are you watching it?" She said, "I have to see how it turns out." Okay,
Yeah.
and so we redintegration likes symmetry. Okay, we
Hmm.
like symmetry. So there's something asymmetry where because there's a pattern that's already in the brain, if we can surprise you with the ending, then it will actually grab your attention. There's a line: "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, congratulations."
Hmm.
That's many of us. We
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
"fool me twice, shame on me." So
Yeah.
the
That's
twist
right.
at the end, comedians love that because and comedians love a lot of these tools because and they use it on a regular basis. So so here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Marilyn Monroe. So Marilyn Monroe, when she was trying to become famous, her name was Norma Jean, and she changed her name. Somebody told her Marilyn was a good name, so she came up with Marilyn. Monroe, I believe, is the name of her stepfather. So Marilyn Monroe. But Marilyn Monroe uses alliteration, a repeating sound. Marilyn Monroe. Okay, that's one. There are famous people in America like Chevy Chase and Barack Obama, and these are they. It's a repeating sound, so it tends to stick to the brain like glue. So, okay, that's the first thing she did was change her name to Marilyn Monroe. The second was Jean Harlow, the famous actress from the early times of the movie industry, was her idol. And she loved Jean Harlow. And Jean Harlow had platinum blonde hair. So what she did was she went to Jean Harlow's hairstylist and had her dye her hair the same color, Marilyn, the same color as Jean Harlow's hair. So that was good. Okay, so now she looks like Jean Harlow. Now Marilyn had a beauty mark on her cheek, and so she'd covered up with makeup. But one day she's sitting and looking at Jean Harlow, photographs of Jean Harlow, and she notices in some photographs, Jean Harlow has a beauty mark on her cheek, and some of it she has it on her chin. And she went, wait a second. I bet Jean Harlow doesn't even have a beauty mark. I bet she's just putting a dot on her face to bring attention to her face. And so Marilyn takes her beauty mark and she uses eyeliner and she just darkens it. Instead of hiding it, she darkened it. In fact, one
Hmm.
of the movies she did, I think it was Some Like It Hot. In one of the publicity photographs, she covered up the beauty mark on her cheek and put a beauty mark on her chin just to kind of have fun with the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people didn't notice it, which is really amazing. But it's just this whole idea of putting a beauty mark on your face that attracts attention. And so
Hmm. It's
there's a famous
disrupting the
model.
pattern, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing! Who ever thought of this? But I mean,
Hmm.
a famous a model, Cindy Crawford in America, is a supermodel, and when she was a young girl, she has a beauty mark, a big birthmark over one of her lips. Okay, over one of the sides of her lip, and she begged her mom to get it removed, and her mom didn't remove it. And right now, she says, "I am so glad my mom didn't remove it because I believe I became a supermodel in a large part because I have a beauty mark which attracts attention
Hmm.
to my face." And what made me think of this and start looking at beauty marks was David Ogilvy, who's a famous advertising executive
Hmm.
in the early years of advertising. He did advertising for Hathaway shirts. And so if you have an ad for a shirt company, what do you have? You have a good-looking model with a shirt and then a nice pair of pants, maybe in a nice environment. Okay, same, you see it everywhere because every shirt company has that. So what did he do? He put an eye patch on his model on one
Hmm.
side. And the guy wasn't a pirate. So, but it was just you flip the pages and you go, oh look, here's a guy with an eye patch. What's that all about? Oh, Hathaway shirts, and it's grabbed your attention because it's asymmetry. It's like
Hmm.
it's something an eye patch on one eye, not on two eyes, just on one eye, but it grabbed your attention. When I noticed that, we had somebody in church that we were sitting with, and then she has a big beauty mark above one of her eyes, and I went like, "Whoa, that's just like uh, um, that's just like the idea of an eye patch. It's like it grabs attention." As I started researching it, I realized this is a real thing. It's in women's magazines. They talk about the fact that no, this idea of having a beauty mark on your face brings attention. It can actually make you more famous. Whoever thought of that? But
Yeah,
it's
it's
amazing, isn't it?
fascinating. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stories in the book that from sort of various business applications, and you've shared quite a few with us there. What what are some of the practical applications that we can kind of take into our own business from this concept of brain glue and using the different tools in our messaging?
So the first thing you want to do is you want to do an analogy or a metaphor for your business. Okay, whether it as in describing it. And so finish the sentence, it's just like, but be as crazy as possible. Don't pick something that's simple, make it as crazy as possible. And then you can back your way down from that. But I mean, look at Paul, the uh, the guy who did the electric razor and called it the lawnmower.
Mm,
Okay, Paul Tran. I mean, who'd ever think that you're going to call the product, the lawnmower, a product like that? And yet it became massively successful. So, to me, the first thing you want to do is pick analogies. Pick the craziest analogy you can to describe your product or service or your business. Okay. And then share it with friends and family and watch, just stop there. Just say, hey, what do you think if I change my description or my product name to da, and just sit there and watch what happens? I
mm,
think in many cases, people I've seen people do this that they're surprised by, like, people are like floored by it. They laugh, but they're
yeah,
fascinated by the whole idea. And so start with that. And I think when you do that, you'll often be so surprised that you'll start to recognize. We had a consulting company, and it was behavioral management. And so one of the tools we had difficulty describing what it was, but then when we came up with an analogy, we said it's just like a personal trainer. A personal trainer comes up into your house, and you're going to do 5 or 10 push-ups. I can get you to do 20 push-ups by egging you on. Well, we do the same thing with your senior executives. And we're going to come in and we're going to push them out of their comfort zone so they can tackle stuff outside of their comfort zone. They may not climb Mount Everest, but if they do little things out of their comfort zone, it's going to move you radically forward. And by using
mm,
that analogy, it suddenly became a lot easier for us to win clients. And so,
yeah,
to me, start with an analogy. It's just
mm,
like, uh, and finish that sentence. And then try to be as crazy as possible. Don't be just logical like you
yeah.
and I and all these people are. Be crazy. It's just like dancing on dancing on your wife's chest. I don't know. But just the more crazy you can be, the more it starts triggering your brain and you start having fun with it and you
Mm.
recognize this could be really valuable as a way to sell my product or service.
Yeah, yeah, that's and I think your point there about having fun with it is a really important one there as well because that's an emotion, right? Having fun, but it's also kind of most of us are in business to make a difference, but also for the personal gratification that we get from serving our clients, and part of that is, of course, having fun on our own and having fun with our clients and
Yeah.
with the success. So yes, that's a really important one too. Well, this is just fascinating, and I certainly encourage people to get a hold of the book. We'll come to that a little bit later and read through. There's lots of different stories and examples, and you've really analysed each example as to why that works and given other examples of that so that people can make their own conclusion of, well, here's 10 examples of this particular tool and here's why it works. So I think now, though, is a good time to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. And it's the same 5 questions that I ask of every guest. And the idea is you'll give us a really snappy answer and insightful tips that will inspire our listener to do something awesome today after they've heard this.
Hmm.
So, you ready?
Sure.
What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
To think of crazy things and think of crazy things. And I get this all the
Yeah.
time. I've worked with companies where with the R&D people, I love saying, 1 plus 1 equals how much? 2. Does it really always equal 2? Yeah, of course. Really? So if I have a flock of birds and a second flock of birds and I put them together, 1 plus 1 equals one bigger flock of birds, doesn't it? you know?
Yeah.
And so, think outside the box, be crazy. And then when
Mm,
people do that, when we do that, it gives us opportunities that we never thought before.
yeah, that's great advice. And was it Steve Jobs? What did he say? The people that think they're crazy enough to change the world.
Yeah, that was brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
think they're crazy enough to change the world are the ones that just might do.
yeah, exactly.
I haven't got it quite right, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Well, thinking outside the box, listening,
Yeah.
listening, just like John Gray listened. My book used to be called uh, "Sell More with the Right Brain Marketing Strategy," which is very left brain. Jack Canfield forced me to change it. He said, "You're trying to sell us on right brain selling, and you have a left brain
Yeah.
title. Are you crazy? You have to change the title." And I said, "Do I have to?" He said, "Yes, you have to change it." And if Jack Canfield tells you something, you're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
do it. So, but yeah, just
Yeah.
think
Excellent.
outside the
Well,
box.
listening to input and think outside the box. Yeah. All right. Do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
Resource, yes. I like LinkedIn, and one of the tools I use in LinkedIn is called I'll tell you what it's called. Duck's Soup, DUX-SOUP. And Duck Soup lets you automate your marketing. So, like, I'm promoting my book, and I get to send a personalized email to a personalized message to people in groups that I'm in. LinkedIn lets
Okay.
you be
Hmm.
a member of like 80 groups or something like that. And it's really good because it does it like a human. So it fools LinkedIn basically. What it does is it sends out one and it takes a little break for 30 seconds. It sends out another one,
Yeah.
takes a break for 10 seconds. It stops for lunch. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. They might be listening.
You okay?
Yeah. It's yeah, it sounds a bit like clever email marketing, but for LinkedIn messaging. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. All right. What's the best way to
Well,
keep a
LinkedIn
client
Sales
on?
Navigator too. So LinkedIn Sales
Yeah.
Navigator is fabulous. I mean, you just, pick the type of client you're trying to go after and you can reach out and
Yeah.
grab them.
That's good, isn't it? Yeah. All right. What's the best way to keep a client on track?
Um, what's the best way to keep a client on track? That's interesting. Get them to agree with just people agree to you us all the time and then just go way off track.
Hmm.
um, the best way to keep a client on track. You got me stumped there.
Yeah. Personal trainer
Because
approach.
here's what's happened. When when people are in trouble, I've done a lot of turnarounds. Okay, we've done a lot of companies or divisions of big companies that are in trouble, and then when you get them back on track, so they start doing really well, and suddenly their sense of emotion and passion changes. They start going, "Ha, we're doing well. I don't have to do that
Hmm.
anymore," and so that's a tough one. I mean, while a person is in trouble, like my guys, the three guys I was telling you about, I took them from 2 to 10 and to 32 million in sales. But they got lazy after 32 million in sales. Money's flowing in, and they got, I mean, just life changes, and so it is while they're in trouble or while they're in a certain mental state, it's easy to keep them on track. But once you pass them, especially because my have, as you have also, I'm sure, but once you go through a dramatic change where suddenly things become much better than they ever expected,
Hmm.
then people just, go off track. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay. All right. And finally, then for the buzz, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Um, to differentiate yourselves is do an analogy that's really crazy. I think that's
Hmm.
the first thing you want to do. Also, look at you know, if you had unlimited resources, what would you do with your business? Okay. I mean, that's one of the areas that people go, well, I actually, hire all these people and I take a vacation. Okay, I got that. But besides that, imagine, try to, we live in a box, a mental box where we say, okay, this is, I mean, do you believe you're going to become a billionaire? Everybody I mean,
Hmm.
I don't, and I don't care. I don't need to be a billionaire. If I have like 5, 10, $20 million, so I'm pretty on my way to that. But I'm fine. I don't need to change the world. I mean, I do want to change the world. But I think that if you focus on um, understand that we live inside a box and try to imagine, spend time and imagine yourself stepping outside the box. And it triggers things inside your brain where you start to understand. So, uh, in my book, I talk about this quick thing. Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali told everybody, "I am the greatest," and he said,
Mm.
"You know who had the greatest impact on? What person had the greatest impact on? Me,"
Yeah,
he
Muhammad
said.
Ali. Yeah.
Yeah, because if I'm telling everybody I am the greatest, I have to live up to it. And
Mm.
so because of that, it forced me to start, came up with the rope a dope and all these different things that he
Mm.
did, you know, but he would say, I am the greatest, I am the greatest. But he had good body language. So you believed that he believed it. But he
Mm.
actually was talking himself into it while he was doing that
Mm.
also. And it's really, stuff like that is really powerful, particularly if you say it in public. Say it in
Yeah,
private.
yeah.
We do
It's
all the say it in private to yourself, and before I go to bed, I'm going to tell myself I am the greatest and everything else. That's not the
mm.
same as saying it in public. Say it in
Mm.
public and watch how it changes your body, your life.
Yeah, yeah. And it comes back to what you were saying at the beginning of answering that question, which is sort of really understanding yourself and figuring out what is it. Because if you can um, do that self analysis and come back and say, well, in fact, I had this thought the other day, and I was talking to Roy Osing on an episode quite a while back now, and his philosophy is in business, you've got to be the only. I was reflecting on that for some reason earlier on today, and I thought, well, I'm probably the only podcaster that has these yellow headsets, and and so if you reflect on that and say, well, there's something that differentiates you, and then you can broadcast that. Now that's a little trivial thing, but if it's something where you believe I'm the best at doing this particular thing and overcome that um, hesitation about being judged on that and share that with the world, because if you really believe it and if you really are good, exceptionally good, maybe the best at that particular thing, then there's an audience somewhere that you can serve. So you want to be making sure that they know about it.
Absolutely, and I do that all the time. I'm glad you said that. I say you have to answer one of these two questions. You have to pick. I'm the only one that, or I'm one of the few that.
Mm.
Okay. And when you get them to define that, because I have these 5 questions, I would say questions are a really powerful tool. What do you sell? To who? How is it used? What are you competing with? And why yours? Okay. So the last two are, to me, the most critical. What are you competing with? And why
Mm.
should somebody choose yours instead of somebody else's? And answer this question. I'm the only one that, or I'm one of the few that. It takes a little work. You have to write on a whiteboard or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
else. You have to do some brainstorming. But as you start thinking that way, suddenly you start coming up with, wow, I never thought of that. But da, 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 da. I'm
mm.
amazed how many people never even considered, that they actually have an edge.
Yeah,
Their edge is, oh, we do better quality. You're not allowed to use the word
yeah, yeah.
quality, okay, in your description.
Mm.
And it's like, well, what do you mean? But our quality is better. Yeah, okay. What does that mean? You know,
Yeah, exactly.
we're we're trained
It's
to
really
such.
worth it's really worth digging deeper on those things, and sometimes it's such a trivial thing that comes so naturally to us that we take for granted. But if we share it with other people, somebody else might say, "Wow, that is amazing. Can you help me do that or understand that?"
Yep, yep,
Hmm.
yep. That's why it
All
helps to
right.
have a
Well,
consultant or be a consultant or have partners. Steve Jobs
yeah.
had Steve Wozniak, the two of those guys
Hmm.
together. Could one of them have done it and not the other? No, they needed the two of them together. You
Hmm.
know, it does help if you have people to bounce ideas off. Someone
Yeah.
who's really going to test. You'll bounce ideas off them, and they'll bounce off ideas. I feel it could be one of the most powerful tools that you ever have. Is somebody, it could be a family member, it could be a friend,
Hmm.
but somebody that you trust their ideas, but they're willing to bounce ideas off you, and you can bounce them off them. It can help
Hmm.
you expand, expand what your own capability is.
Hmm. Excellent. Yeah, great advice. All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round. Now, this has really been great. Where can people reach out to find out more about you, to get a hold of the book Brain Glue, obviously, and maybe even reach out to say thanks for what you've shared today, Jim?
Well, the best place is if you go to braingluebook.com, it will take you to Amazon and you can see the book. And whether you buy the book or not, I mean, hopefully you buy it, but if you don't, that's fine. But Amazon lets you read a bunch of pages in the book. We also have an audio book. And we have we have this guy, Johnny Unitas, who's a fantastic narrator. He's hilarious. And there's a hilarious story, but really quite a profound story in the audiobook part if you click on that. And so, yeah, braingluebook.com is the easiest place to check out the book.
Excellent. So we'll have the link for that in the show notes, of course. Now, what action would you like our listeners to take out of today's conversation, Jim?
Analogy or metaphor? It's just like I want you to take your greatest idea or a product that's most important for you, and I want you to say it's just like and pick something that's crazy out of the box. Okay, it's just like jumping off my roof onto a trampoline. I don't just try to stretch yourself as far as you can. I bet that and then share it with somebody. Share it with somebody you trust. That could be friends or family or coworkers or whatever. But come up with answer that question. It's my idea is or my product is just like okay, and force yourself to stretch. And I think that you're going to have it's going to really have an impact for you.
Yeah, and test it with family members, like you said earlier, or trusted partners. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights so generously today, Jim. I'm looking forward to completing the book. I think I've got about an hour to go on Audible, according to Audible. And I certainly encourage people to either listen into the book or read it, whatever your preference is, because there are a lot of other fascinating stories in there and a lot more explanation about this whole concept of brain glue. So thanks for giving us a snapshot and an insight into that world today, Jim. I've really enjoyed our conversation today and learned a lot. I wish you all the best for the future, and
Thank
please
you
do
so
stay in
much,
touch.
Jürgen. I really enjoyed this too. Thank you.